In our course, we've been using Oracle VM VirtualBox Manager. So this is, of course, a product by Oracle that we install on our Windows systems, which then allows us to install virtual operating systems. However, it's certainly not the only option out there. In fact, the three big players in this market are VMware, which is a company that makes a whole slew of different hypervisors, and that's what we call these managers. We call them hypervisors that host guest operating systems. So VMware makes a whole bunch of different ones. VirtualBox, which we're using, and then HyperV is one that's actually built into Windows. It's in Windows 10, and it's also built into Windows Server. The manager window in HyperV looks something like this. Now you can see that it looks a little bit like VirtualBox. We've got the machines over here, and then we can start them and stop them here in the middle. And then over here we have a whole bunch of settings that looks a little bit intimidating. It's a little bit more complex than VirtualBox. Well, there is a lot to HyperV. And because we're in a Windows MTA class, we want to look primarily at HyperV because that's what's going to be emphasized on the MTA test. In order to install HyperV, even though it's already on Windows, it has to be installed. So on server, you would install it as a role, just as you do any other role on server. And then on Windows 10, you would install it through the Windows Features applet in the control panel. And so here it is. You just turn on this checkbox and HyperV would install. One piece of warning though, don't try to install both HyperV and another hypervisor on the same system. It will not work well. Just having them installed on the same system will probably make them not work correctly. Now HyperV is a type 1 hypervisor. Now what in the world does that mean? Well, a type 2, which is what VirtualBox is, and VMware Workstation, in those cases you have hardware, right? This is just typically a computer, and then you put Windows on top of it. So let's say Windows 10, and then you would install VirtualBox, the hypervisor, up on top of Windows, and then you install the operating systems on that hypervisor. However, in a type 1, we get rid of this Windows here. Windows becomes one of the guest operating systems. So you've got hardware, and the hypervisor is installed directly on the hardware. In essence, it is the operating system. And then you install the other operating systems on top of it. Now, wait a minute, you say, didn't you just show us that you're already running Windows 10 or Windows Server, and then you're installing HyperV on top of it? Yes, it does look like I'm doing this. But what happens is, when I install HyperV, it sort of slips itself underneath Windows and makes itself a type 1 hypervisor. This does add a lot of speed to our virtual machines because these OSs here don't have to go through Windows in order to get down to the hardware. It's a much more direct route. Throughout the rest of this module then, we're going to be looking at various aspects of HyperV, and we're not going to go into great detail on some of them, but we'll be looking at things like how the memory works and how the disks work and things like that.